Max Verstappen walked away from that crash in Austria with a smile. A four-time world champion was knocked out by a new driver. His chances to win the championship might be ruined. And he was smiling. What the cameras didn't see was the talk. That happened after a talk that might have just changed all of Formula One, because that wasn't just Max being nice to Andrea Kim Antonelli. That was a future Mercedes driver having a chat with his possible teammate. But here's the crazy part. When you look at all the F1 teams right now, Mercedes isn't just Max's favorite choice. It's literally his only choice. And that need might be exactly what makes him decide. Even more shocking, his own father, Jos Verstappen, is reportedly pushing him toward leaving. Music Act 1. The setup. The year is 2024, and Max Verstappen's Red Bull team is falling apart. Not with the big crash you'd expect from movies, but with the slow, steady braking that makes champions desperate. Red Bull's winning streak is gone. McLaren is doing great. Mercedes is getting better. And Max, he's driving a car that finished third in the team championship while somehow pulling it to a fourth straight title through pure skill. But here's what the racing world has been whispering about for months. Toto Wolff hasn't given up on his dream. The Austrian team boss has been trying to get Max Verstappen for over 10 years. He missed him as a teenager. Watched Red Bull steal away the greatest talent of a generation. And now Max might finally be able to leave. But more importantly, he's stuck. Because when you look at all the F1 teams, there's literally nowhere else for a driver as good as him to go. And the most hurtful hit of all, his own father is telling him it's time to leave. Meanwhile, in the Mercedes garage, George Russell has been having some very interesting talks. Not about his contract extension, those talks have mysteriously stopped, but about something far more explosive. The possibility that the most winning driver in Formula One might be switching sides. Music Act 2. Rising Action. Let's talk about what really happened in Austria, because that crash was just the start of something much bigger. Lap after lap, Max had been managing a Red Bull that simply wasn't fast enough. The RB20 that won easily early in the season had become a middle-of-a-pack car disguised by Verstappen's amazing skill. And then, Antonelli, a teenager making his first race, locked up his brakes into turn 3 and sent the championship leader spinning into the barriers. In any other season, with any other driver, you'd expect anger. Championship points disappearing because of a rookie mistake. That's career-changing frustration. But Max didn't explode. He climbed out of his destroyed car, walked over to Ant, and had what looked like a perfectly friendly conversation. Almost nice. And here's where it gets interesting. Because sources inside the racing world are now suggesting that conversation wasn't just about the crash. It was about the future. About Mercedes. About what 2026 might look like under the new rules. You see, behind the scenes, Toto Wolff has been planning the most daring driver steal in modern Formula One history. He's been in constant contact with Max's team, and the message is clear. Mercedes is ready to build their entire 2026 project around Verstappen. But why would Max even consider it? Simple. The writing is on the wall at Red Bull, and when you look at his options, the reality is brutally simple. It's Mercedes or nowhere. Ferrari already locked down with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, two amazing talents who aren't going anywhere. Music McLaren, Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri are both doing great and signed to long contracts. That leaves exactly one competitive seat, possibly available in the entire sport. Mercedes, music, but here's the bombshell that changes everything. Jos Verstappen, Max's father and closest advisor, has reportedly been pushing his son to exactly this conclusion. The man who guided Max's career from go-karts to 4 world championships is now telling him that Red Bull's time is over. Adrian Newey, the design genius behind Red Bull's winning, has already announced he's leaving. The internal politics between Christian Horner and Jos Verstappen have created a toxic environment that's so bad, Jos is actively advising his son to walk away. And most critically, Red Bull's struggling with their 2026 engine project, while Mercedes is reportedly miles ahead in power unit development. Act 3, the climax. Here's what no one wants to say out loud. Max Verstappen's Red Bull contract might not be worth the paper it's printed on. Yes, he's signed until 2028. But Formula One contracts are full of performance clauses, and Red Bull's current path is triggering every single one of them. If Red Bull falls outside the top 3 in the team championship, which is looking increasingly likely, Max has options. But here's the genius of Toto Wolff's strategy. He doesn't just want Max because he's the best driver on the grid. He wants him because Mercedes is literally the only team that can offer him what he needs. Music Toto Wolff knows it. In a recent interview, Wolff was remarkably honest. We are very transparent about what we do and what we plan. Clearly, you need to explore what's happening in the future. I can imagine every lineup. I had Rosberg and Hamilton fighting for a world championship, so everything else afterward is easy. Music, that's not guessing. That's a man who's already mentally placed Verstappen in a Mercedes cockpit. A man who knows that when the music stops, Mercedes is the only chair left for Max to sit in. Meanwhile, George Russell has been dropped into an impossible situation. His contract talks are on hold, while Mercedes courts the sport's biggest star. But rather than panic, Russell's playing it perfectly. It's only normal that conversations with the likes of Verstappen are going on. From my side, if I'm performing as I'm doing, what have I got to be concerned about? Smart, confident, but also revealing. Because Russell knows something the rest of us are just figuring out. This isn't just about 2026. This is about the complete restructuring of Formula One's power balance. And the brutal mathematics of the driver market mean that Max has no choice but to make this work. Even Helmut Marko, Red Bull's notoriously combative advisor and Max's closest ally within the team, is getting nervous. His recent warning to Verstappen was telling with us he has a lot of freedom which he would not have with Mercedes. That's not confidence, that's desperation. Because Marko understands what's at stake. Lose Verstappen and Red Bull becomes just another middle team with a fancy energy drink sponsor. But here's what Marko really fears. He knows that Toto Wolff isn't just offering Max a seat. He's offering him the only seat that matters. And Wolff believes Max can get performance from that Mercedes that no other driver has been able to match. Something we've seen Max do consistently at Red Bull, even with worse cars. But perhaps most damaging of all, Marko knows he's fighting a war on two fronts. Against Mercedes' recruitment efforts, and against Jos Verstappen's influence from within. Max's own camp. Music Act 4. Resolution and impact. The dominoes are already falling, and most people don't even realize it. George Russell is currently sitting just 9 points behind Verstappen in the championship. Think about that. A Mercedes driver in a car that was struggling at the start of the season is now breathing down the neck of a 4-time world champion. That's not just good driving, that's a statement. It's Russell proving to Wolff that he belongs in any conversation about elite drivers. But it's also dangerous because if Russell actually overtakes Verstappen in the standings, it might trigger the very performance clauses that allow Max to walk away from Red Bull. The irony is delicious. Russell driving better than ever might be the thing that costs him his seat. But where does that leave everyone else? Ferrari is locked up with Hamilton and Leclerc. No movement there. McLaren has Norris and Piastri sewn up tight. The only top-tier seat available is at Mercedes, and Toto Wolff is making it very clear who he wants in it. The timeline is aggressive. Rumors suggest that by Silverstone literally next week, we could have clarity on Mercedes' 2026 lineup. And if Verstappen commits, it doesn't just change Mercedes, it potentially destroys Red Bull's entire competitive structure. Here's what Red Bull is really afraid of. The 2026 regulations represent the biggest technical shakeup in decades. New engines, new aerodynamics, new everything. And historically, the teams that win these regulation changes are the ones with the best drivers and the best preparation. Music Mercedes has been planning for 2026 since 2022. Their engine development is reportedly ahead of schedule. Their technical infrastructure is world-class. Add Max Verstappen to that equation, a driver who Toto Wolff genuinely believes can extract performance that others simply cannot. And they don't just become favorites, they become inevitable. Meanwhile, Red Bull would be left scrambling. No Newey, no Verstappen, and an engine project that's already facing significant challenges. The most successful team of the current era could find themselves back in the midfield within 2 seasons. But here's what makes this story even more fascinating. It's not just about Max Verstappen anymore. The driver market's brutal mathematics mean that if Russell does get displaced, his options are limited to. But Aston Martin is already circling, and Lawrence Stroll has made it clear that he wants Russell to lead their 2026 project. Suddenly, you have a domino effect that could see 3 of the sport's biggest names switching teams simultaneously. Verstappen to Mercedes, Russell to Aston Martin, and